Okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you all so much for joining us, either in person or virtually. My name is Jesse Wieland. I'm the Associate Director at the Office of National Fellowships, and sure on screen, but we also have.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Garcia-Glockner. I'm the Assistant Director for ONF.
And so we're here to specifically talk about the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship primarily, but we're going to be mentioning a few other awards that our office supports students with. But before we get into all of that, just for those of you who may be freshmen or haven't worked with our office before, or just new to this type of application cycle, just to briefly touch on what is a fellowship. So the easiest way to describe it is that scholarships, those simply provide funding. You can apply to it. If you receive it, you get that funding. You can just use it however you want. But a fellowship, they are primarily fully funded. Most of the opportunities that we work with students on are, but they're providing you with an experience. In this case, we're going to be talking primarily about international experiences, but a fellowship can also be used to fund research. Can also be used to fund domestic experiences. It can be used to fund conference presentations or experiences. It can be used to fund graduate school. So fellowship is essentially a catch-all term for all of those experiences. And so with that full funding that they come with, all of these awards tend to be nationally competitive, some a little bit more competitive than others, but we send students to these programs every single year. So that competition is never a reason not to apply, but that's a reason to make sure that you're seeking out the resources, not just Bonnie and myself, who will sit with you and review your essays and provide edits and ideas, but also by working and building relationships with staff and faculty on campus. Maybe you do know your research. Maybe they are in charge of one of these international programs that we're going to be talking about. So for a lot of these applications, I mean, not to be too cliche, but it really does take a village to collectively make sure that by the deadline, you're putting together the most compelling and authentic application possible. And so I kind of already touched on this a little bit, so when we are in the dregs of the application process, in like the weeks or sometimes months leading up to that deadline, what Bonnie and I will primarily do with you is sit down and review and edit those personal statements, statements of purpose, and sometimes other components that make up your application, just to make sure that it is as polished as possible, like I said earlier. Managing those applications, again, depending on the award, can be very difficult because while we'll primarily work with you on the essays, they usually come with letters of recommendation, sometimes affiliation letters, transcripts, other items that you may need to collectively pull from other places on campus, or you'll need to coordinate with your faculty, whomever's writing those letters of recommendation. And then for many students, myself included, when I was an undergraduate and as a graduate student, this writing style can be pretty different. It's not like we're in high school and we're writing that 5-paragraph essay, intro, body, conclusion. You need 3 supporting points. This is not that. Oftentimes you can be given very condensed, like sometimes 500 words or less, to write a compelling personal statement. And my opinion is that you cannot tell a complete story in 500 words, or it is very challenging, but that is what we're here to help you with. So we sit down and we reflect on what are the most compelling experiences that you've had, maybe on campus, off campus, or in your time before Florida State, and how can we condense those and weave them into as complete of a narrative as possible in 250, 300, 400 words. And we'll go from there. Now, the main award that I know most of you are here to talk about, learn a little bit more about, is one of my favorite awards that we work with, the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship. It was created under this larger umbrella of IIE, which stands for the Institute for International Education, and they provide many different scholarship opportunities for students to travel abroad, study foreign languages, engage in research, earn a graduate degree abroad. But Gilman was created, I think it was just about 20 years ago, to increase access for students who may otherwise opt out of these opportunities, maybe due to financial means, maybe due to unfamiliarity with international experiences, sometimes due to disabilities that they may have. And so Gilman was created to provide additional funding for those populations to make sure these opportunities are more accessible. So to be eligible for the Gilman Scholarship, and we'll get into this a little bit later, you do need to be receiving a federal Pell Grant either at the time of application or during your international program. And so the nice thing about Gilman is that it's extremely flexible to whatever your academic schedule or calendar looks like. So for many students, probably most students, summer is the most flexible term for them to travel abroad, for maybe anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, maybe for the entire summer. But for other students, maybe you're looking at a fall term or maybe a spring term, or in rarer cases, but it still happens, students that are looking at a full academic year abroad. So a fall and spring, or potentially fall, spring, and summer. And so any of those program lengths could be eligible for Gilman. Now, it doesn't change the maximum amount that you can receive, and so it's up to $5,000 that you can use for a plane ticket, cost of living, food, maybe a quick jaunt over to Paris if you're studying. Like, it doesn't matter. It is your money. Use it how you will. Now, most students that work with our office are receiving between $3,500 and that maximum $5,000. If you have questions about the review process for Gilman, I would be happy to get into that at a later date or in a one-on-one meeting. But there is an option for those of you who may be currently or may be interested in the future studying a critical need language. The list is on the slide here, and that is according to, that list is made by both, IIE, but it's for the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarship and what is called the Critical Language Scholarship, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Now, there are other awards that have a much longer list of languages that you can study, but if you're applying to Gilman and those are the languages that you're interested in, you do not need to have a background in that language. You do not even need to have any proficiency in it, but you just need to understand why this language is important to your studies, your academic development, your professional development, or what you want to do in the future. And if your study abroad program is going to allow you to primarily study that language in a country where it is primarily spoken, then you can qualify for an additional $3,000. It's so for a total of up to $8,000 that you can apply towards your program. Hello. And so just to quickly touch on the eligibility for the Gilman Scholarship. So you do need to be a citizen or a national of the United States. You do need to be an undergraduate in good standing at your university. I can tell you that has never been a concern for a student that I have worked with. Gilman is very flexible when it comes to academic performance. They understand that for many students, many first-gen students like myself or other students that maybe are still learning this campus environment, that GPA is not wholly reflective of your potential or your ability. And sometimes, myself included, we had bad semesters as an undergraduate, but what they're looking for is that you are academically prepared for the program that you're going to participate in. Now, like I mentioned, one of the most important criteria is that you do need to be receiving that Pell Grant. And I know some students, sometimes they opt in or opt out of at different times during their undergraduate career, but it's either at the time of your application, or if you're applying for, say, this cycle, but you're not planning to actually go abroad until the fall or spring of next year, and you don't have it now, but you will have your Pell Grant next year, then you would still be eligible. Another thing that sometimes trips students up is because, and we'll get into this a little bit later, there is a fall and a spring deadline for Gilman. And each of those deadlines, you can apply up to a year in advance of when you're wanting to go. And so sometimes what prevents students from applying in the fall semester, for example, if they're wanting to study abroad this summer, is like, well, I haven't been accepted yet. I don't know, I'm not going to hear back, and that's okay. That's not going to preclude you from being selected in Gilman's eyes. But what we would need to do is make a very educated guess about where you're going, the program you're participating in, what you're doing, get as much detail about that program as we can. And that's what we include in your application. That's what we're projecting. So it's like, okay, best case scenario, I will be here. For example, I had a student last year who was applying it, well, they knew they were accepted to a program in the United Kingdom for an internship, but they had no idea where that internship was going to be. So we were kind of in a pickle, but we wrote about that in the application. We knew they were going to be in London. We knew the nature of the work that they were going to do. And we included a short list of like their top options for what they would want to do. And as long as you're specific and detailed, that is really what Gilman is looking for. And then that last little caveat, you need to be applying to a country that is a level 1 or 2, according to the US Department of State. If you just Google US Department of State Tribal Advisory, it'll take you exactly where you need to go. And you can search by all of the countries available, and a 1 or 2 is okay, and a 3 or a 4 is not. But some 3s are still okay if the reason, say they're a level 3 is if the Department of State can approve that. You know, there is a little bit of wiggle room, but most countries that Florida State has programs in Western Europe and Latin America and some other places are going to be fine. But we'll sit down with you and talk to you about that if that's a concern, but it's very rarely a concern for most students. Now, when we're talking about the selection process, and Bonnie could also speak to this as well, since we both reviewed for applications this past cycle, is Gilman is first and foremost, like I mentioned earlier, looking for your academic preparedness for this program. This is not saying you need to have a 4.0 GPA, you need to be involved in this, that, and the third to be eligible. They just want to see, based on what you are doing through this internship, through this study program, through this research program, whatever it is, that you have the potential to do well in that program. That's what they are looking for. Diversity of background and experience is extremely broad, and it's unique to every applicant. I've reviewed applicants that are students in their early 40s that started college, quit college, came back to college after they started a family, and they're pursuing this program in Thailand. We've reviewed applications for students with disabilities that need additional accommodations during their program abroad, and they talk about that in their application. We have students that come from very rural parts of the United States and have not been able to experience or engage with many of the cultures or languages that they're wanting to engage with in this program. And so what you need to do for this is just tell your story. Talk about those challenges that you've overcome, or talk about those identities that you may hold, or talk about those experiences that you've had that have prepared you to excel in this program. Destination is, so Gilman understands that the majority of programs available to many college students, and this is at no fault of their own, this is just what universities provide, are oftentimes going to be in the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Portugal. And if that's where you want to go, that is absolutely okay. You should absolutely apply to that program. But Gilman kind of gives a small plus to your application if you're applying to a region of the world that is underutilized or under access when it comes to study abroad. And they classify that as Eastern Europe, the continent of Africa, or Southeast Asia, some areas in Southeast Asia and Oceania. And so if you're going to one of those programs, it's not a reason why they're going to select you, but it is noticed, and they are wanting to send students to these, like I said, these underutilized destinations. And for some students, that has looked like a DIS project or a directed individual study with a professor that they know on campus who may be doing research abroad. It has also looked like research projects and labs in those areas. It's looked like internships for students. And so we can help you find those if that's something that you're looking for. Or there's absolutely nothing wrong if you're wanting to apply for a broad curriculum program through international programs at Florida State, as long as you can tell me why those classes that you're taking is important for you in your development. The impact to community is important in two ways. And so in one of the essays that you're going to write, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, one of the essays asks you to articulate what are you going to do when you're in country to engage with the people and the culture and the place that you're in. How are you going to go out of your way to go beyond just what is required of you for the program? But they also want to see, and this is in another essay that you're going to write, when you return to Tallahassee or return to Florida State, or you return to your hometown after this program, whatever that may be, what is that impact that you're going to make with your peers, with your community here? That has looked like many things in the past. I've had students that, very artistically talented students that have talked about projects they've wanted to create about their time abroad. I have students that are part of specific organizations or clubs at Florida State, or they're a part of the Southern Scholarship Foundation, or they're a part of CARE. And they're like, I want to collaborate with some of my peers and I want to present on our collective time abroad and how we all did these different projects, went to these different destinations. That is okay. I've had students talk about, I come from a high school that doesn't send a lot of students to college, but I was able to make it, and I want to speak to my former peers, and I want to tell them, well, this is how you navigate the application process for college. Also, when you're at college, these are some of the scholarships and experiences and opportunities that are available to you if you know how to seek them out. I don't need you to tell me all of those things. I need you to choose something that is authentic to you, something that is feasible for you to do, because you will have, so for example, if you go abroad this summer, you will have the entire fall semester to do that project. And then you need to write, it's like a one-page essay that is just, what did you do? What was the impact? Who attended? You know, blah, blah, blah. And then you submit that to Gilman, and that's essentially like you're done with your Gilman experience. And so you want to make sure that it's something you can do in, 4 to 5 months. And then the last criteria that they're looking for is only if you're applying to one of those critical need language awards, you do need to articulate in an additional essay, and I can go ahead and jump to that because I think it's on the next slide, not quite, but I promise I won't lie to you again. But that additional essay is essentially saying, this is the value of this language for me, or these are the specific this is the vocabulary I need to learn during this program, or I need to become better or more confident at engaging with native speakers, or whatever it is. Like, this is how I need to grow in the language, and this is how I'm going to apply it when I come back to Florida State, or when I am taking maybe more advanced classes in the future. And so we'll go over the essay components. I believe that's on the next slide after this one. But just where do I get started when it comes to learning more about the scholarship, learning more about available programs and the like? Obviously, if you go to their website, it is open now. You can create an account. That does not mean you have to apply this cycle if you don't want to, but I would recommend creating an account so you can go in, take a look at the essays, take a look at the prompts, be jotting down ideas or thoughts that you have for experiences or anecdotes that you may want to include in the essays. You can also, the website also has blogs and videos, things that you can access. They have a list of alumni ambassadors on the website, one of which is a former student of mine, and actually a former student of Bonnie's as well, because he was in bio, Charles Ford, who, if you would love to talk to him, I can get you his contact information. But we also have, in the years that I've been working on Gilman, I have about 6 years worth of alumni that have been to all different parts of the world, that would love to talk to you about their experience, their program, maybe contacts they still have in country. And so this application isn't due until the beginning of March. And so if you start now, you can really confirm, maybe through some of these conversations or through some of the research that you do, that this is the best program for me. This is the best destination for me. I feel really confident in traveling here and challenging myself in this way. But anyways, use the resources on the website. I made sure I frantically went in and added this to the presentation today. Make sure you please remember the email that you use when you register and create an account, because we just went through our fall cycle and we had some recipients, and I had some students reach out and they're like, did you hear any news about Gilman? I'm like, yes, decisions came out a month ago. Did you not check your account? So please check your account. But anyways, off of my soapbox. Look at programs at Florida State. If you are very new to studying abroad and it's something that you have not considered in the past, that is absolutely okay. Florida State, when we're looking at universities nationally, is one of the better institutions at providing quality programs abroad. And so if you can't find something through looking at international programs, looking at the Center for Global Engagement, or even looking at AIFS programs, which is not through Florida State, they're affiliated, but anyway, we can talk more about that in a one-on-one. But if you can't find anything through here, then we can, okay, we'll find some other stones to overturn. But start here, see what you can find. Maybe think about, am I looking for a traditional study program? Like, do I want to take classes abroad? Do I want to look at an internship or maybe more work experience? Do I want to look at a research opportunity? Or, you know, we even have things like Beyond Borders, which that deadline unfortunately may have passed, but programs that are purely cultural exchange. Like, I'm not taking classes, I'm not interning, I am just here to engage with the people, learn about the culture, maybe sip a wine on a beach. I don't know, but that sounds fantastic. And that can still be, I have had students that have received funding for Beyond Borders and other similar programs in the past. This last little bit of information at the end is really just to emphasize that you can apply to this application entirely on your own. You do not have to come and talk to us, and we will support you from afar if we can. But if you do come in and work with us, it significantly increases your chances of being selected for this scholarship. As you can see, since 2020, obviously the pandemic presented some very unique challenges that we had to navigate, but about 90% of students that worked with myself, Bonnie, and other colleagues were offered funding. Some of them were not able to accept it because of program cancellation, but it just goes to show that, you know, having someone review your thoughts, review your essays, go over that with you and provide just supportive feedback goes a very long way when those essays then go to a review committee and they will be doing the same thing, but actually grading you on all of those things. So please come in and talk to us is the point. Now for the application and what is being asked of you, I know it's like 7,000, thousands and thousands of characters, but it is really not that much. The first essay, that statement of purpose essay, 7,000 characters is about 1.5 pages, single space. You can crank that out in an evening if you have to. I would not recommend it, but you could. And so the statement of grand purpose, what that is looking for, it's essentially an amalgamation of like a personal statement, a statement of purpose. And so you're talking both about myself, my goals, things that maybe challenges I've overcome, you know, what I'm wanting to do long-term, what are my goals, but you're also talking about the program, the destination, and what you're doing abroad. And so we, in a one-on-one with myself or Bonnie, can break down that structure and help you write something that's pretty linear and cohesive. But if you just look at the prompt online, it's easy to maybe kind of feel overwhelmed with how much you need to include. But when we break it down, it's not as much as you think. Essay 2, 3,000 characters is about half a page, single space. But that building mutual understanding, that's what I was talking about earlier when it's coming to impact to community, that community abroad. So what that essay is looking for is, how are you going to step out of your comfort zone? What skills or talents or interests do you have that may be of interest to the people, the culture, the population that you're working with? So how are you going to, and I think these are the words that Gilman uses, quote unquote, how are you going to serve as a citizen diplomat during your time abroad? I can tell you things, and I'm sure Bonnie can as well, things that aren't as effective as they may sound. For example, if you tell me I'm going to go abroad and I'm going to eat paella in Spain, like that, great. I hope you do. I know it's delicious, but that is not cultural engagement. That's not going to, I mean, you have to eat food to literally survive during your time abroad. So let's find other things to talk about that have a little bit more substance, and then you should absolutely find some banging paella while you're in Spain. Now, for the third essay, that is the follow-on service project. That is the other side of that coin where, okay, so I'm returning to Florida State, I'm returning to my hometown, I'm returning to my clubs and organizations, whatever that may be. Identify that population. Who are you talking to, or who are you engaging with? Who are you presenting to? Whatever that is. Identify that population, identify literally what you are going to do with that population, and describe for me the impact that you hope it has. You know, like I said earlier, I'm going to go back to my old high school. I'm going to talk to I have my favorite teacher who teaches Bio 1, and I'm going to talk to these students about I had a student that was working with sea turtles a couple of years ago, and was talking about the research that they did, and they wanted to talk to their peers about conservation and sea turtles in the coastline. And also I'm going to mention, this is the scholarship that funded me to be able to do this. When you get to college, you will be eligible as well if you receive that Pell Grant. The last essay, essay 4, is only for students that are applying for that critical need language award. So 2,000 characters, about a third of a page, just re-emphasizing why you need to improve your language proficiency and in these ways. The nice thing about Gilman is that you don't need any letters of recommendation. It's pretty fantastic, especially if you're a first-year student and you're like, I'm still trying to learn the names of the people in my classes or the professors that I'm taking. Now, for some of these other fellowships that we're going to talk about in just a second, you do need to build relationships, positive relationships with staff and faculty on campus, because a lot of these applications are going to require anywhere from 1 to 3 to maybe 5 letters of recommendation when you're in your 3rd or 4th year at FSU. And so start now. But for Gilman, don't need them. And then the application is due by 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on March 9th. So you could tell yourself midnight. You technically have, I think, until about 3 a.m. Please do not submit this at 2:30 in the morning. That is not a good idea. Websites have crashed in the past, so maybe give yourself a little bit of a buffer. But that is plenty of time to get in, even if you're starting from square one, even if you're like, I don't know where I want to go, I don't know what I want to do, you have a couple months to get that figured out, and we're happy to help you along the way. Just to reiterate, this deadline in March, that is for programs that are starting between May 1st and April 30th of next year. So what that means is, if I want to go abroad this summer, if I want to go abroad next fall, if I want to go abroad next spring of 24, and you know roughly what that looks like, you can apply now and hopefully receive funding by the end of the spring that you can just sit on for a few months, 6 months, or however long, and apply to other scholarships next semester. Maybe eat ramen for a couple of weeks and budget a little bit of money, put that away for your time abroad, whatever it takes. But if you don't receive it, if you apply, say I'm applying for a spring 24 program or fall 23 program, I apply, I don't get it. You do have the opportunity to reapply in the fall semester, as long as it's still before your program begins. So the same rule applies for the fall deadline. So for the October deadline, if you know, like, well, it's not this summer, but next summer I'm studying abroad. If it's within that deadline, that time frame, you may still be eligible. But that would be an instance where you may need to wait until the fall to apply, but you can still come in and talk to us and plan ahead. I say all of that because if you're studying abroad for this summer, it is still very likely you can receive funding, but the earlier you plan, the higher your acceptance rate tends to be.
Just to reiterate, you apply to Gilman in March, you'd be able to apply those funds for this upcoming summer.
Correct. This March deadline, if your program starts anytime after May 1st of this year, you're eligible to apply for this cycle. Does that make sense?
Saying that it would be better if we had started it last fall for that.
I'm not saying better, you just have that option.
Okay.
So if you're like in your 1st or 2nd year, my opinion is like, shoot your shot whenever you can, because you don't know what next month holds or next year holds. But if you can plan, so this is also not like, Gilman is not the only option to study abroad. Gilman is a great option, but a Gilman nomination, and I have many examples of students like this, I know Bonnie does as well, where students started with a Gilman scholarship and say, I went to Florence and they have like a fashion merchandising program in Florence or something like that. Excellent. And then maybe I look at a Fulbright fellowship, maybe I look at a critical language scholarship, maybe I look at one of these other awards. But now on my resume, I have a Gilman scholarship, I have international experience, I have been making connections with faculty, I've been taking the classes that I need for my major. You will just increasingly become more competitive as you navigate your time at Florida State, if that ramble makes sense. So Gilman is a very good option, but Gilman, in my experience, snowballs into, if you allow it, into other options and experiences, both internationally and domestically. So yes, if you apply for funding this summer, if you apply for this cycle and you don't receive funding, then we won't wait until that decision to do this. But if I'm working with a student, say on an international programs, like a London program, Spain program, whatever that may be, we're applying to Gilman and we're working on an IP scholarship, and we're working on applying to maybe departmental funding. We find other sources, so it's like you're not just relying on Gilman to get you there, but maybe you have a couple safety nets underneath you to make sure that this is a feasible program. So if you are looking at an international program option, I would go onto their website right now under that Money Matters tab. They have a list of scholarships that you may be eligible for that I would know when those deadlines are. Get that submitted, because those can range from anywhere from like 25% off, 50% off your program, or flat rate, or whatever that may be. And that can be stacked with funding that you could get from Gilman. And I have plenty of examples of students that have had price tags of like $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 programs in London, and they've had more money, more scholarship funding than they needed for that program, because they planned ahead, because they put their hat into these separate rings, and they just wrote these essays. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I don't want you to think it's like, oh, I missed the October deadline, my opportunity shot. It's like, absolutely not. Other questions, quick questions before we move on? Cool. This next little caveat, I won't spend much time on. It's exactly the same as the Gilman Scholarship in every way, except for those two little caveats that I have here. So it's the same amount, up to $5,000, but you need to be the dependent child or spouse of an activated or an active duty military member. So if that is you, then we would technically be applying to a Gilman McCain scholarship and not a Gilman scholarship. But the award, like everything besides that is the same. It's also nice because this one is not Pell specific, but you do need to be receiving some type of financial aid. Any questions about that? I know it's pretty straightforward. I should also say, if you apply to the Gilman McCain scholarship and you don't get it, you're still eligible for the base Gilman scholarship. And the same goes, I didn't mention this earlier, if you apply for a critical need language Gilman award and you don't get it, you are still eligible and considered for the baseline Gilman scholarship, the one that's up to $5,000.
Step parent. Would they still count? Or would they have to just be, they would have to be considered a dependent person, correct?
That's a good question. I would assume that you would need to be the dependent of that person, but that's a question that we would ask Gilman just to clarify and make sure. It's a good question. Okay. Now, that's I can talk for far longer than y'all would like to hear, but Gilman is going to be the majority of this presentation. These next awards are just going to be like, hey, if you're thinking about this, you should do this. So Freeman Asia is very similar to Gilman. It just has a couple of different caveats, and you can read through that here. So Gilman doesn't have a GPA requirement. Freeman Asia does, but it's a 2.8, so it's pretty manageable for the majority of students that we work with. So Gilman can be any length program. Freeman Asia needs to be at least 8 weeks. And they do give you, and I put that list here, the list of Asian countries that are considered eligible for Freeman Asia. So if you're thinking about your program is going to be somewhere in East or Southeast Asia, and it's in one of the eligible countries, in theory, you could apply for both a Gilman and a Freeman Asia scholarship to hope, increase your chances of being selected. Conversely, say if you're in your first or second year, you have that time, maybe your Gilman scholarship could be to South Korea, and then maybe next year you want to use a Freeman Asia scholarship to either go back to that country or go to a different country in that region. That could be an option. So just consider this scholarship if that region, that part of the world is of interest to you. And then this is just, again, another long list of awards. But if you're interested in language study, Gilman can be a really great point of access if you haven't taken any language courses in the eligible list of languages that we had in the presentation earlier. And if you registered for this, we'll send you the presentation so you have it. But for the critical need language scholarship, for example, that list of languages is the same. But you do need to, for some of those languages, and I'm talking about Korean, Russian, Mandarin, Arabic, Portuguese, and I may be forgetting one other. You do need somewhere between 1 and 2 years of academic study, or you need to be able to opt into, maybe you're a heritage speaker, or maybe you had some experience in high school. You can still opt into it, but you need to meet that threshold to be eligible. But for all of the other 10 or 12 languages that the Critical Language Scholarship supports, I'm talking about Urdu, Punjabi, there's a couple African languages, and in this moment, I'm not going to remember all of them. You need no prior experience. You just need to understand why this language is important to my future and my development. Now, the David L. Boren Scholarship is also focused on language study. It has a little bit more of a focus on U.S. national security. That's a very broad definition. I've had students that have defined national security relative to public health, relative to humanitarian efforts, relative to conservation, and all of that as a reason for why I needed to study this language. So I need to study, I could give you an example, but I need to study Russian because I'm working in Central Asia doing this research project focused on this. And by studying this language, by doing this research, I can improve relationships between the United States and this country that I'm doing this research in, just for example. And so Boren is nice because it can fund up to $25,000, so it can fund a full academic year abroad. The one caveat with that is that it requires that you, after graduation, within a 5-year window after finishing your undergraduate degree, you need to spend 1 year working for the federal government, and they give you plenty of options and departments that you can work for. You do have non-competitive status when you're applying. So what that means is if you're applying and you have this non-competitive status and there's another applicant, all things being equal about your applications, you would get the bump over them. So they do try to make it a little bit more accessible for students that participate in that scholarship. And that can be paused, that 5-year window, if you are pursuing another fellowship, if you're pursuing graduate school, if you're pursuing some of these other eligible experiences. So Boren is one that you can, you need to do it as an undergraduate, but you can also still apply as a senior year, as a senior year candidate. And we just work with the registrar's office. Again, this is more information than you need, but just know that if you're a 4th-year student, you're not out of the running just yet. Princeton in Asia, Princeton in Africa, it's run through Princeton University, but they have plenty of opportunities throughout Asia and Africa for education experiences, for English teaching assistantships. I believe they also have some research opportunities, internship opportunities, but that's just another option. Again, if you're focused on very specific regions or parts of the world, that's another one that you can look into. Humanity in Action is one that we're actually recruiting for right now. That's due in early February, if I'm not mistaken. And that is for a summer like cohort-based program. There's 4 or 5 destinations in Europe, and then there's one in the US, but it all focuses on human rights and social justice topics from both a historical and contemporary perspective. And so I believe it's about 4 weeks long. And wherever it is that you apply to or are placed, the curriculum is tailored to that region. And so that means the site visits that you're going to, the guest speakers that are coming in, the action project that you are in charge of is all related and rooted in the place that you're in. Project Horseshoe Farm is for maybe any student that is interested in public health, that is interested in social work, that is interested in policy studies, that is interested in, it's a pretty wide range of interests, but essentially what that is, they have internship opportunities, but then they also have a 13-month-long postgraduate fellowship, a gap year experience, if you want to say it that way, for students to engage with underserved communities. And so students are engaged in like after school programs with youth. Students are engaged with the elderly and helping them receive, maybe apply for healthcare, maybe apply for some of the services that they need. You're there as a resource. And so you're working with a pretty wide range of populations in rural Alabama or rural California. And dependent on the California placements are exclusive to students that have intermediate to advanced Spanish proficiency. But if you're thinking medical school in the future, or if you're thinking graduate school in general, they have an extremely high placement rate for students that want to go to their top choice. So again, another one that we're recruiting for right now that's due in early February, and would love to talk to you more about it. DoddRise and Amgen are for research experiences in Germany and the US/Asia respectively. And so DoddRise has already passed, but you don't need to speak the language of the country that you're traveling to engage in research. All of these labs operate in English. And so if you're wanting to engage in some STEM topics or research, maybe something related to what you're studying here at Florida State, that could be a really great option to get abroad. We're also recruiting for the US-UK Fulbright Summer Institute right now. That is for first or second year students. Full funding to go to the United Kingdom over the summer. They have different placements at different universities in the UK that have different curricular focuses. Some that focus on like tech and innovation, others on arts and activism and social justice. One that focuses on Ireland and like issues within Ireland, and a few others where you don't need to necessarily be a major of like these topics to participate in this program. You just need to understand how these topics maybe relate to what you're studying, or how getting involved in the United Kingdom, getting involved in one of these universities abroad is going to help you in your studies and in your future goals here. And lastly, the Fulbright US Student Program, that is for rising seniors, alumni, or graduate students. And that is up to a full year abroad to maybe receive funding for a one-year master's degree abroad, to receive full funding to teach English alongside a partner teacher abroad, or to engage in a creative art project of your choosing, or to pursue a research project abroad. It exists in over 80 different countries, if I'm not mistaken. And this is one that we're also very successful every year about sending students abroad. And so for that opportunity, what they're really looking for, again, like we were saying for Gilman earlier, is they're looking for cultural ambassadors. They're looking for that citizen diplomat that is really genuinely interested in engaging with these other cultures, these other populations, to create, so I guess I'll say it like this, is they're looking for those positive representatives, but how you're engaging with these communities is through an academic means. So whether that's in the classroom, through research, or through a creative arts project, whatever that is, they want to know how that project is unique to the place that you're traveling to, and what you're going to take away from that experience and bring back to the United States. That is a lot of information, I know, but if you are interested in any of these opportunities, we do have additional workshops throughout the spring semester. So feel free to go to our website and learn more about those, or go ahead and register for those. Go to our website. We have a really great search engine that we're in the midst of updating, but all the information there is still accurate. Where you can search by your year at Florida State, you can search by your major, you can search by the type of scholarship you're looking for, and find a host of options, hopefully, that align with what you want to do. And then the next step would simply be to email myself, Bonnie, Christine, Dr. Filer, and we would be happy to sit down and talk about these scholarships, these application processes, and just help you plan for that experience. I am going to be here for at least the next 10 minutes, and Bonnie as well. So if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about, anything in general, please feel free to type it into the chat. Feel free to ask out loud or unmute yourself if you would like. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure speaking with all of you. Thank you for listening to me ramble on and on and on about the Gilman Scholarship. It's one of, like I said, it's one of my favorite opportunities for students, and I'm really excited that all of you are at least interested in applying, and hopefully do apply. But, oh, thank you.
I know that some of the scholarships, like they ask for like the sign with an advisor or something, or sign with like someone on the like FSC summit or something like that. How do you find like someone to do that for you?
So it depends on the award. So for some fellowships that we work with, you need university endorsement in order to apply. Fulbright is the only one that I've mentioned in this presentation that does require that. But if you need like your host institution to sign off on this international program that you're doing and make sure that that is eligible. That could either be through international programs or I can find the right person for you to reach out to if you can't. Sometimes it's your faculty advisor. Again, it really depends on the program.
I
And
was
so,
thinking of like the general one.
okay.
Yeah.
So you, for anything like Gilman, it needs, so the program that you're applying to, it needs to be like a credit bearing experience. So if you're applying through international programs, if you're applying through global exchanges or AIFS or any of these programs, like there's, without getting too much into the minutia, like you're going to be fine. Like they know these are eligible programs. And so when you are working on the application and you do have to find your study abroad advisor or your financial aid advisor, the financial aid advisor, you can list absolutely any of the names. They all do the same work and they work in the same office. You're going to be fine. When it comes to the financial aid advisor, that it depends on the program. So if it's international programs, I can tell you who you need to put down. If it's global exchanges, I can tell you who to put down. Or if it's maybe something outside of Florida State, you can put down myself or Bonnie, but we just need to go in and get that information. Again, this is really technical, like it's better for like a one-on-one meeting, but I'll make sure that you know who you need to list, but it's based on the program you're applying for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was applying for international.
International programs, I believe it is going to be Beth Renice. If you're in the application, she's going to be the one that you want to put.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
I actually have a question, for it to be credit bearing, like, is it like just credit bearing in general, like it could be one credit, or like, do they have like?
It could be
stipulations?
technically 0 credits, you know, but it's
Credit bearing.
credit bearing, but you do not necessarily have to accept the credit. It just needs to be.
Okay, so they figured it out, because we're applying to like something outside of FSU, it's like music based.
Uh-huh.
But they said they can do credit bearing because we're gonna take like Italian classes there, so like that would definitely be something.
Yeah, I would make sure that you opt into that.
Yeah,
To make sure it's eligible, yeah. But see if it's like, can it be one, I mean, based on what you need, so you don't get into that excess credit counter.
yeah.
You know, it's like, can it be 1 credit hour, or can it just be like a 0 credit
Zero.
course, just shows that I've done this, and maybe that,
Okay.
you know, would be a way around that.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
What if, if you do like a study abroad program in the summer, does that count for like classes over the summer?
It can, it depends on the program, but it can count for classes. But I've also had students that have just pursued internships over the summer, so they're not taking a formal class, but they, you know, they're getting their hands dirty every day, you know, and working with a very specific organization or group. So it just depends on the type of experience that you're wanting to have.
So we want to go to London,
Mhm.
not this summer, but next summer. So when should we start applying?
So for Gilman, if it's, I'm assuming your program is going to start sometime in like late May or June at the very earliest. So you wouldn't apply for this cycle, but you would apply for the October cycle. So this coming fall semester. And that would be one of those examples where you apply in October. If you get it, great. If you don't, you reapply in March. However, you know, looking at the US, UK, Fulbright, and some of these other opportunities, depending on what you're doing for this summer, maybe there's another program you could apply to for this coming summer, and then next summer go through an international program or something like that, you know, but it really just depends, you know, but there's a lot of opportunities out there. Mhm. Other thoughts, questions, ideas, critiques about my presentation style?
It was good.
Okay.
I've never seen like a lot of people like show up to these though. Like I've been like online before just to like get the information, but I don't know, I feel like more people should know about it.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm glad. I mean, everyone that attended online, thank you so much, but it's nice to just see faces. So, you know, the last couple of years, obviously, virtual learning was very challenging in many ways. But then also getting students like excited about being in person again also took, I think, all of last semester. You know, and so obviously I understand like health is very important. We want to be cognizant of that. But happy you're here regardless of how you're joining. And so if anything that we talked about today sounded like oh yeah, that's my friend, or that's this person, you know, like, feel free to like share, like, recommend us or send them our information. I'd be happy to talk to them. Because prior to the pandemic, we were getting about like 70 to 80 applicants a year for Gilman, and getting about like, you know, 30 to 40 recipients, like very consistently. And our acceptance rate is still as good, if not higher than what it was pre-pandemic, but our numbers are, it's like, and I think part of why it was so many students prior to the pandemic is because we had years of, you know, 20 to 30 students that are traveling abroad, and then they're putting on these follow-on projects, and they're engaging with their peers, their communities, and then those students are coaching the next class of students, and then they're coaching the next class. And so the pandemic unfortunately disrupted that. But like I was saying on the website, Charles, who's one of those Gilman alumni ambassadors, he graduated in 2017. He studied abroad in Ghana and did it was like a health shadowing program at a hospital in Ho, if I remember correctly. And then he went through the Global Scholars Program, which some of you may be familiar with, but then went on to be, you know, to apply for Fulbright. He was a semifinalist for that, for a very competitive award, but then went on to earn his MPH, or his master's in public health, the University of South Florida, and now works for the Department of Health in Florida. And so what I'm saying is, it's like, you know, it all started for him as a shadow experience in, you know, West Africa. And then that snowballed into all of these other things that he's done since. And that's just one example of all of these different students. And so again, just to reiterate, would be happy to put you in contact with any and all of these students that are relevant to the projects you're wanting to do, the places you're wanting to go, and they would be more than happy to speak with you. And we still have some students that are currently abroad right now, that are either currently students at Florida State or alumni of Florida State that would be happy to speak with you. So.
We did a Q&A, I think it was last semester, with some Gilman alumni as well. Or was it just with Charles, or?
No, it was Charles, and Aria was there. She did her experience in northern Vietnam, and then.
So that's
one
on
other
our
Yeah.
YouTube channel. Just we have a selection of like alumni that have talked about different awards that they've won. So when we send out the link for this, you can find those in there. as
Yeah.
well.
Probably need to schedule another one of those for
I
the
think
spring
so,
too,
yeah.
but it's at least on YouTube right now if you want to watch it.
Yeah.
But there's a few different Q&As.
Okay.
Cool,
Thank
and we
you.
still have about 5 more minutes. Feel free to head on if you need to, but I'll be here if you have any other questions.
Thank you.